right. So, hello, everybody, and welcome to another monthly Wendt Partners web event. Say that 5 times fast. I am Doug Wendt. I'm the President and Chief Growth Officer here at Wendt Partners. I am joined by the amazing Jacquie Wright, who is one of our implementation and platform solution consultants. She works in our platform solutions team, and she is a native Chicagolander. So we're going to have a lot of fun. I'm here in New York. She's in Chicago. So we get to have a good time picking on whose city is better. And we're really excited that you all are here with us. Let me give a little bit of background and then we'll dig in. So we are at Wendt Partners a HubSpot Elite Solutions partner. HubSpot, if you're not familiar, is a global platform for customer relationship management, or CRM. And as you're going to learn today, some of the key things that make HubSpot a really unique solution. One of them is that it is one product and one database. So it's one piece of software, and it can connect and integrate functions within your company that have to do with your customer experience. So that includes your sales, your marketing, your customer service and customer success, and also commerce and content. So everything relating to how you communicate with today's customers and tomorrow's customers is going to be something that you can do in a unified platform, and that's HubSpot. Again, I'm joining you from our headquarters in New York, and today's topic is about how best to approach the strategy and ultimate success of integrating HubSpot with other technologies. No technology in today's business environment should sit on an island. And we wanted to dig into, well, what does that really mean then to connect HubSpot to other applications? What are the why? Why would I do it? What are common reasons that people go about that process? Is it easy? Is it hard? What should I think about before I execute an integration project? And so to help us uncover some of that discussion, I am joined by, again, Jacquie Wright from our implementation team from Platform Solutions. Hello, Jacquie.
Thanks for the warm welcome. Happy to be here.
Excited to have you here. Before we dig in, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you come about becoming a HubSpotter for that matter? And then tell us a little bit about the kind of work that you do every day with clients here at Wendt Partners.
Yeah, of course. So I actually fell into this in sort of a random way, but I'm grateful I did. I actually started my career in retail management and unfortunately was furloughed during COVID. And I'm not one to sort of sit around and do nothing. So I just started playing my degrees in marketing. I started looking at different tools, CRM systems out there. I started taking HubSpot Academy courses and just started learning the tool right itself. And when I felt like I had I was feeling good about the knowledge that I had gained, I just started applying to some companies, some HubSpot partners out there. I landed a job and here I am today. So it's
Boom.
been wonderful. It's a great tool. And yeah, it's great. Happy to be here.
And tell us a little bit about what your day is like today, what kind of work you do and how you serve clients.
Yeah. So one of the things I love about this job is majority of it is client facing. So I spend a lot of time on calls with clients, basically learning about what they do and figuring out how to configure and customize HubSpot for their unique business needs. A lot of recommendations, a lot of discovery questions, things like that. So it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. So you're learning about people's companies or organizations, and then helping them learn how to apply HubSpot to that environment, to that business need.
Exactly.
So it's both the technology skill, the knowledge of HubSpot, but also the knowledge of business and business processes and how to connect those two together.
Yeah, absolutely. Both are critical.
So in case you are wondering, Jacquie is extremely talented and extremely busy. So we thank you for taking time out to join me today, Jacquie, for this month's web event. So let's dig in a little bit, let's just kind of start with, what are some key reasons why a business should consider integrating HubSpot with other systems? And then after we dig into that, I'm going to expand upon that a little bit about, just for those who don't know, like, what is HubSpot? But first, I want to talk about what is this integration thing of which we speak, and what are some reasons why businesses and organizations should consider integrating?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to set the scene here to start. So let's say you are going about your business and you are entering information, you have an incoming lead, you're entering it into one platform.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden you realize, oops, marketing doesn't have access, or the service department doesn't have access, or this team, whatever that team is, doesn't have access to that information I just got. So now I got to enter it into their system they use. So it's duplicating your efforts, it's time consuming, right? So the number one reason to integrate, in my opinion, is just to improve efficiency, right? You want to have access to all the data, no matter what department it is. You're all looking at a single source of truth in one system. Um, so that's kind of step one, right? And I think those things help with sort of that overall customer experience, right? So you want to make sure that you have all that complete up to date data in one place. I don't know about you, but when you get on a call, let's say you call into customer service or into sales, and they're kind of going, yeah, well, remind me again about where you're at and who you've talked to. It's frustrating, right? So I think it's super
Yes.
important um, to have everything in your face in one platform where it encourages collaboration amongst the team, right? So your team, whether you're in service, sales, marketing, whatever you do for the organization, you're able to communicate internally on that same record, as well as with the customer, and you're prepared to handle questions, comments, concerns, things like that.
I'm
So
actually
those
going
are
to
kind
bring
of,
in.
oh yeah,
No, no, no. Go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah,
I was just going to show. I was going to take a moment and share screen here, and
yeah,
to put some visual to this. Right, you're talking about having everything in one place.
yep.
So this is my contact record. Just for example purposes in our HubSpot system, and in the center piece here, right, I have all of these activities that are filtering in from different places. And I also want to call out, one thing I think clients often forget is just by implementing HubSpot across their enterprise, they are integrating functions that were never integrated before overwhelmingly. In other words, when's the last time a marketing department sent out an e-newsletter and all the salespeople knew which of their customers or prospects engaged with that content, clicked on it, watched the video, read a blog article? Never, basically. And so the first integration problem that HubSpot solves is just being HubSpot, putting all that information in one database and having multiple departments interact in one database. So the first three columns here, right, are all information that's being brought in automatically just because you're using HubSpot. Now, just think about that, everybody. This is 48 different categories of information, of whom I think if I did the math, roughly 30 are coming in just because you're using HubSpot across your organization. We use HubSpot for sales, for marketing, for service. It runs our website. It runs most of our commerce as well. So we are a good use case, right? Most customers start with one hub. You don't have to start with all hubs. That's not a requirement. Most customers use one or two hubs. Okay. So the first integration objective in most companies, in my view, should be, you know what, just do more HubSpotting. You will solve so many problems by having this all in one place. And then on top of that, we have integrations with other systems. As a result of all that, to your point, it's literally all in one place, right?
Yeah. And I think that's a great point. One of the things that we do when we start off working with clients is sort of analyzing their existing tech stack, right? Because HubSpot, the best part of my job is saying, you don't have to pay for that. You don't have to pay for that, right? Like I'm
Mm.
eliminating those tools that you no longer need because HubSpot's providing that use case, right? And then it's
Yes.
okay, these three systems or whatever it is, I can't eliminate. I still need them for my business purpose. How do
Mhm.
we connect the two and make sure that information is flowing well and that it's going to be a seamless process?
So with that in mind, what are some of the most common applications that you see clients seeking to connect to HubSpot in one way or another?
So I think there's a lot of sort of, we'll call them just like the basics, right? So
Mhm.
connecting your email, which would allow you to see all of that communication back and forth with your
Mhm.
prospects or your customers. Things like your scheduling tools, right? So making sure that you can schedule meetings with people and all of that information is logging directly in the system. And then there's sort of that communication piece. So for instance, here at Went Partners, we use Slack to communicate internally. So it's not
Let's
just an
just pause
internal.
there. We use
Oh,
Slack to communicate. We use Slack to joke. We
oh,
use Slack
yep.
to say, "Did you do this yet?" We use Slack
Funny
for
memes.
everything. Funny
Yeah.
memes, yes. That's right. So it's not just to
And
communicate, it's to riff, it's everything. Yeah.
And to be productive, we are
Yes.
productive in Slack because I
Very.
receive notifications when I have to do a task or check in on a customer, right? So it can be used in all different avenues, right? To have fun, to do some work, a little bit
Right.
of both. So
Right.
yeah, it's definitely so those are some of your basics, right?
And the
We also
HubSpot
have a
and the HubSpot
yeah,
Slack integration is really powerful. And I'll loop back to that
yeah.
because I want to use that as an example of like what can an integration accomplish when it's properly designed and prepared.
Yeah, some of the other basics, then we'll get into them, is, advertising and social media integrations, right? So,
Mhm.
I find a lot of clients that say, well, I have this, outsourced company that does my advertising and I have no idea, where we're at. I don't know what we're spending. I don't know what we're doing. I don't know the ROI on that.
Right. Who
So
are these
we always
people and what are
recommend
they doing here?
yeah, well, that's fair,
Yes,
but to
absolutely.
each their own. So yeah, connecting like your Facebook ad account, your Google ad account, your social platforms, right? To make all of it seamless in the system and streamlined so that then you can report on that, use that to make educated business decisions, things like that. We also one of the ones we do all the time is we do utilize the connection between Salesforce and HubSpot. A lot of people tend to start off with HubSpot as more of that marketing lead generation tool, and then we're handing off to the sales team in Salesforce.
Mhm.
We do often find that people then eliminate Salesforce, right? Come to the good side. No, I'm kidding.
Right. That
But
I didn't take it as a joke. I took it as a statement of fact, but ah,
But yeah, so that's a huge one that we do integrate with a lot is the
yes.
Salesforce connector.
Yes.
Um, Webinar platforms, right? So if you do events like a GoToWebinar, Zoom, things like that,
So
those are the
like
big
this
ones.
event itself, right?
Mhm.
This web
Yeah.
event itself, when you registered, folks, you registered on a HubSpot form on our website, but that data was automatically transferred over through our Zoom integration into Zoom. And then depending on who registers and attends versus who registers and doesn't attend, that information is also passed over to HubSpot. So we can immediately and automatically market to the people who registered, market to the people who attended, send different communications to people who didn't attend, like, sorry, you weren't able to join us, wanted to share the link with you. We can auto personalize those journeys just because of this one integration.
Yeah, absolutely. Another good sort of journey when you're discussing. So e-commerce integrations are huge, right? So
Mm,
your Shopify, your WooCommerce, things like that. Being able to communicate when someone abandons a cart, when when someone makes a purchase, just being able to thank them, to remind them to come back, things like that. Those connections are super powerful. It's sort of staying in front of that customer and
yes,
reminding them, "Hey, we're here. Buy something," Um,
absolutely. And by the way, since you bought that really cool pair of paisley socks, did you also want the paisley shirt that goes with it and the striped tie to provide a nice balance of look?
I didn't know you were a Paisley guy, Doug. I'm honestly surprised.
Argyle, paisley, stripe, long tie,
Okay,
short tie, bow tie.
okay.
I've got it all. Boom.
Shorts.
Jackie's like,
That's
I don't
fair.
know. I don't know
Yeah.
about this
I've
guy.
not seen you in a bow tie yet, but we'll see if tomorrow you show up to work in a bow tie.
Anything's
Um,
possible.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's true. That's true. The other big one, I just want to call this out because this is a huge one for a lot of clients, is your QuickBooks Online, right? So your
mm,
financing platforms, and then your Stripe, things like that, to be able to obviously collect payment, have the whole system running into one tool. So I
mhm.
would say those are the biggest ones that we work with sort of every day. And then obviously there's your different use cases that are specific to each and individual client.
Yes. Yes. So I'm going to give an example. I just want to take the Slack one as one example and emphasize that when we say integration, I'm going to talk a little bit from my perspective on an important thing people need to keep in mind. The word integration has a million meanings, and all integrations are not alike. And we'll dig into that in a little bit. But what I want to emphasize is when you ask, does it integrate? The real question that needs to come back to you, the client, which is, what do I want this integration to accomplish? Like, what is the business problem I'm trying to solve? So, in the case of Slack, okay, it's important for us to be able to convert information from Slack into records in HubSpot and get notifications from HubSpot over to Slack and relate things together. So, for example, when our strategic accounts team is working on a large opportunity, we can automatically have Slack create a channel for the team to collaborate around that deal, and those will be linked. And then any particular notes that we want to mark can go back into Slack. So you can see here associating HubSpot deals and companies with Slack channels. You can even use shortcuts to find and link to HubSpot records and use the workflow engine in HubSpot to automate those connections. The reason that I bring this up, first of all, this particular connector is extraordinarily well designed and implemented. Like the relationship between Slack and HubSpot in terms of the smoothness of this tool is unparalleled. At the same time, I want to emphasize for our audience, if this tool just did one thing, let's say get HubSpot CRM notifications in Slack, it would still be called an integration, right? So integration does not define the depth of the functionality. It only says that two applications have some form of communication relationship. Okay, it doesn't define the type of relationship. And that's going to become really important when we talk about how to choose, plan, and implement the right integration. In this particular case, there's one solution, which is the integration that HubSpot and Slack developed together and made available. But in a lot of cases, there are multiple options for how to connect HubSpot with another system. Actually, the QuickBooks example is a great one because there are a number of different ways to do that. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. So my point being two things. Number one, this is a great example of a really powerful integration that was designed from the ground up to solve for certain priorities that clients typically have. And second of all, to remember that ultimately it's up to the client to be clear about what they need an integration to accomplish for their organization, for their business, and make sure that the integration tool or strategy they select makes that possible. So I want to talk a little bit about the things that clients should be thinking about. When you work with clients, Jacquie, you know, a lot of the examples that you've given are definitely clean use cases. Like I want my data from my ads platform in HubSpot, right?
Yep.
In a lot of cases though, and the Salesforce connector is actually a good one because it's a very powerful tool, right? And it's one of those tools that can, like on paper, you say, geez, I flip a switch in HubSpot. How hard can that be? Right. And yet, you know, you could spend 10, 20 hours configuring, testing, and getting that integration just right. So let's talk about like, what are some of the things clients really would benefit from thinking through when we're going to set up an integration for them?
First things first, this might seem obvious, but I've definitely experienced where this is missed is who are the people on your team that need to be involved with determining how this integration is going to be used, right? Because if we say, well, you know, I had a client the other day, they wanted to connect Salesforce and it was primarily their marketing team and we were sending, you know, the leads over to Salesforce.
Mhm.
And I said, well, have we had conversations with the sales team? What is the end goal here? What type of information needs to go back to Salesforce? How do we want to communicate with the sales team in order to make sure that we're getting the most out of this connector? And the client just kind of looked at me and she said, well, I need to talk with the sales team, right? So I think number one is how does this tool, like you said, Doug, fit into your existing business processes, right? So, like, where do we it's not just like, okay, HubSpot and Salesforce. Is Salesforce connected with anything else? Is HubSpot connected with anything else? Are there other tools we need to consider? And if so, all of those parties need to be involved in the planning and sort of the process of connecting the integration, right? So
Right.
that's kind of like step one.
Yes.
Um, I
Uh,
think
Let
in
me zero in on that if a
yeah,
little bit with
yeah,
another example, if you don't mind, because I
of
don't think
course.
it's silly or obvious. I think it's the first thing that almost everybody misses. When
Yeah.
one department buys a piece of software, the
Mhm.
impacted parties are not just that department. And it is critical in any organization that you involve stakeholders from all of the impacted departments, including senior leadership, including IT. I'll give an example. This happened 3 years ago. We had a client. marketing implementation client. So Marketing Hub, HubSpot Marketing Hub. Their ERP software, which is, for those of you who don't know what ERP is, it stands for Enterprise Resource Planning. It is similar to QuickBooks. It's accounting software, but in more complex enterprises. Typically, in a larger company, it'll handle production, inventory control, warehousing, payroll, HR, all of those functions in one system. Their ERP system that did all that is called Acumatica. It's a very well-regarded product in the marketplace. And their goal sounded simple. All they wanted to do was synchronize company records between their Acumatica system and HubSpot. And there's a native integration. We'll talk in a few minutes about what a native integration is, but there's a native HubSpot integration available. Anybody with the right admin privileges to the HubSpot account can download it, install it, and click one button and turn it on. So without discussing it with us, that's exactly what the client did. They didn't discuss it with anybody else in their company either. What they didn't know is that their company is a wholesale distributor of apparel products, actually. And when you are in that kind of industry, you are typically billing one company and shipping to 100 locations. Like, let's say that you distribute your products in, Walmart. Okay. I mean, that particular customer was focused on B2B, and so they weren't delivering to Walmart, but we'll go with the example. You might send all the invoices to one address and one company, which is Walmart's headquarters in Bentonville, Arkansas. But there are 1,500 Walmart stores you might ship to. And what the marketing team didn't understand is that in their Acumatica system, in the database now, all of those locations were company records. They were simply tagged as shipping locations. But if you actually look, what table in the database, it's like, for those of you who are getting a little lost on what's a database and how does it work, think of this as filing cabinets. I want to share files between my company filing cabinet and the other team's company filing cabinet. My filing cabinet is set up so that one filing folder is for each company itself. The other team's filing cabinet was set up so one folder has 1,500 pieces of paper in it, all representing different shipping locations. And then the billing address. So it'd be 1,501 if you go with my example here, right? The headquarters billing address and then the 1,500 stores, 1,501. So when they turned on that connector, and of course they turned it on bidirectionally, what happened was all of the shipping addresses came over to HubSpot as individual company records, and then they duplicated and went back over to Acumatica because they had a new ID created by HubSpot, because HubSpot hadn't seen those records before. So HubSpot correctly assumed that they were new to HubSpot, and sent them back to Acumatica, which then added a new record ID to them, and they actually created a runaway condition. And within an hour, they had quadrupled, or quintupled the size of the ERP database, and they almost brought the company's entire operations to their knees. And you can imagine the emergency calls that were sent out. I give that as an example because what seems simpler on the face of it than making sure that ABC company here is ABC company there. But trust us when we tell you, you're going to want good guidance, because it's never that simple.
Yeah, 100%.
Jackie, how does that relate to your experience? Have you seen some of those like close calls?
Quite a few, yeah.
Just a few, yeah.
Yeah, I always like to say, and here's the thing, right? Like, a lot of clients are familiar, they work with, different tools every day. It does seem simple, or maybe they're really comfortable in Salesforce because they've been using it for years, and now we're introducing HubSpot, so they think it's the same, right?
Right.
However, there are, and I say this a lot to clients, there are these little nuances related to HubSpot that are specific to HubSpot that if you are not in here day to day, you just don't know about, which makes sense, right? But like, you have to accommodate and be prepared for those, sort of one-off scenarios.
Yes.
The other thing I wanted to touch on that you kind of brought up is, it's not just about these two tools. I find also clients get very sort of trigger happy. They find this new software, they're super excited, they go in and they plug it in and they test it out. The problem there is we're not thinking about the big picture, right? So it's not just about like, this SMS tool talks to HubSpot and I can send text. Great. Well, what other departments in your company uses the SMS tool? what system are they working out of? How
Mm-hmm.
does, like, what are your criteria for this particular integration, like you said, Doug, but also the tool itself, not just like, what do you want these two to do? What if you're introducing a new technology or a new tool, right? Like that's another piece of the conversation is doing your due diligence and research on what this new tool is and then connecting it
Mm.
is super important too.
You hit on something I think I really want to zero in on and just make sure everyone hears. And that is you're not just integrating technology, you're integrating your company. And
Yes.
oftentimes people make the mistake of thinking the technology will solve the people problem. And it will
Hmm.
not. In fact, it can exacerbate the people problem. I'll give you another example. We had a client that had Marketing Hub for years and then decided to replace Salesforce with Sales Hub. And thus ensued, having nothing to do with us. And there's a great client, and they ended up having a very successful implementation. But they had an internal battle over who would control how the database is structured because marketing and sales had different views of how to use certain fields and how to categorize customers and all of these
Yep.
things. This is why we actually talk about HubSpot has a lot of guides around creating service level agreements within your organization, creating SLAs so your departments agree to a common language. A database is only a reflection of the company that uses it. And going back to that Acumatica example, neither group was wrong in how they were using their system. But once you connect systems, they have to have a common language across the whole company. And that begins with a common language amongst the members of the company. Hey, billing department, we are looking to share customer data between these two systems. How do we do that in a way that provides what we need? Here's what we need, and in a way that protects your needs as well. In that particular example, it might have required a couple of hours of work by their Acumatica partner to configure additional fields and workflows in their data. Probably not a couple hours, probably 20 hours. Let's just be blunt. Okay. I should never say a couple hours. Nothing ever takes just a couple hours in our business. But what they probably could have done is call their Acumatica partner, just like calling their HubSpot partner, had them come in, do a small project to make some configuration changes in their ERP system to support the additional use case. And now everybody's on the same page, both technologically and business wise. That's how you strengthen organizational culture and process, right? Integrating the customer journey technologically when departments inside that company who touch the customer still won't talk to each other does not accomplish much. And we want everybody in your organization to talk with one another, to use that common platform that we are trying to build for you to strengthen your business, which ultimately should make employees happier too, by the way, because employees get really frustrated by these black holes and these bottlenecks as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think most of my time on calls when we're doing sort of an implementation for more than one department is I think we should both be on this call, both departments, and learn what
Mm,
the other is doing and sort of have that. So I do feel a little bit
yes,
like a middleman, right? But it's great if
absolutely.
I can help sort of bridge the gap and start that conversation. It's important, right?
For those of you who are wondering, Jacquie should be a certified facilitator and a certified conflict resolution expert because she's definitely proven her
Mm,
mettle in both areas. But you're
appreciate
right.
that.
You're driving
Mm,
change in the client's organization. The
yeah,
software happens to be the project or vessel of that change.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think another thing too is, I think clients sometimes have unrealistic expectations about an integration, right? So whether it is the time it takes to implement or connect the two and sort of do your due diligence, like how does the data sync? What fields will map to each fields, right? So I think overall it's such a large discussion, and I think
Mm.
clients often get frustrated with the fact that it's not a 1 hour meeting that we have and we connect your platforms and we go and everybody, goes
We're
out and has
done.
lunch, right?
Right. Right.
It's a big conversation. I think the other thing that I've noticed too in terms of unrealistic expectations is companies don't like, businesses don't always want to pay for a custom solution. So they go, well, let me just try the native connector, which we'll talk about in a little,
Hmm.
where it's just, connecting the two pieces and whatever the default setup is, I'm going to just make it work. And
Mm-hmm.
then what we find is we've spent time working on this native connection, but what we haven't done is solved any of the needs for the connection. So that's a big
Mm.
thing too, in terms of setting expectations. Let's spend the time doing what will improve efficiency, increase ROI, like all the things, improve collaboration that are really going to have an impact on the business. That's the key to figuring out what tools are going to talk to each other.
Absolutely. And I'm gonna pop up our integration one pager that we were talking about before the web event started here in just a minute, Jackie. But I want to mention something. I'm sure it can sometimes appear that we are all like there's nothing ever wrong with HubSpot. HubSpot is perfect. And I will tell you guys, if you want to look for a place where a lot of people have a hard time, it's actually in integrations. In the HubSpot directory, and we'll talk about this in just a moment, there are more than 1,500 what we call native connectors. And what you'll find is that the more mission critical connector, the lower the reviews or ratings of it are. A lot of them have 1 or 2 stars. They got miserable ratings. But when I review them consistently over and over again, with rare exception, I find it's not because of a technical problem with the connector. It's because it didn't solve the customer's use case. We
Yes.
really can't blame the connector. It's free in that particular instance, right? Most of them are. Um, and it's incumbent upon the client to know what to look for and then to validate that it meets their needs. So, if you're looking for that really advanced solution, just because 2 logos are next to each other on a web page does not mean the free thing is going to solve your problem. So it's about the right solution to the problem, not just about the appearance of solving the problem. So I feel like those rankings are often, unfairly low because there's really nothing wrong. The technology works. It just doesn't work the way you wanted it to. And that you may have a legitimate gripe, but that's why you should be looking at multiple options where there are, and often there are.
You
So
say it better than I do, Doug.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that. So this is a one pager. We'll make sure that everyone has it post program in follow up from our team. We put this together to provide a visual guide to the different ways that you can connect HubSpot with other software. Don't worry, folks, there's no test at the end. But I want to just quickly touch on the 6 examples that we have here. And the reason they're in a step format is they're in the order of price and complexity. So left starts with free, and then at the right is, basically everything custom. So let's start with a native connector. So we've thrown around that term a lot. It's a very HubSpot specific term. Every software vendor calls them something different. But let me actually pop up the directory of where you can find these things. And let's talk about what these are. So here's the HubSpot app marketplace, over 1,500 connectors in here of different points. Jackie, tell us a little bit about what native connectors are and how they work.
So it's for in this scenario, they're pre-built by HubSpot. So they develop them and they maintain them. And it's just a way to connect to systems, right? It usually requires, they're available here. You can sort of filter if you scroll up, Doug, on the left, you
Mm-hmm.
can filter on whether it was built by HubSpot or whether it was built by a third party.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones built by HubSpot are the native connectors that we're talking about. Um, Yep. And so if you ever had questions, troubleshooting, things like that, they are maintained by HubSpot, and you would be able to partner with either someone like us, right, who helps sort of work on it, or you could call HubSpot support. But yeah, just developed and maintained by the HubSpot developers.
Mm-hmm. And free to use.
Yes, free.
Yes. Now, the only thing to note here is free to use doesn't mean there's no cost. It means that the requirements are controlled by the plan of the software that you have. So some of these, literally any Outlook build and any HubSpot account can connect. Others, for example, the LinkedIn one, there are a couple different ones, but the LinkedIn Sales Navigator connector, which is one of the ones built and maintained by HubSpot and is free, but it requires LinkedIn Sales Navigator Advanced Edition, which I not so jokingly call Sales Navigator Massively Overpriced Edition. So sometimes, typically that's not in the control of HubSpot. Typically that's in the control of the other vendor, but that is a gremlin to keep in mind. I've had clients download these tools, these self-serve style tools, plug them in and then wonder why they don't work. And they don't work because you don't have the right plan for the 2 products. All of that information, by the way, will be specified on the ecosystem description page. Most people stop here. You got to scroll down. It'll list and usually show an example of each primary feature. And then below that, where the really important thing, to me, this is where it really gets important, is the kind of information from the other application, where it shows up in HubSpot, and which way the data goes, which, by the way, means unless you see double directional arrowing, it's only going in one direction. And sometimes connectors will have different information going one way and different another, but no particular piece of information going both ways. So it's really important. This is here for a reason. It's to help you decide if this particular tool will meet your requirements. Then it will show you what is available. In this particular case, even if you have a free Slack account, it'll still provide a certain level of functionality. Okay. And even this connector, which gets very good ratings, not everybody gave it 5 stars, but this is very high ratings for what I see. I think most people, it does what they are expecting it to out of the box, and it does it very well. So there's a lot of information. These are detailed for a reason, and that's to give you the right information to make an informed decision if you're doing this on your own. If you're doing this with us, we'll walk through your use case and advise you. But it's really important to understand that you may discover a particular connector doesn't meet your use case, or at least not everything you're envisioning for your use case. So that brings us to the second category, which is still these connectors, but the ones that require HubSpot Operations Hub because they have more advanced functionality. Jackie, can you give us just a 2-penny tour of what is HubSpot Operations Hub?
Yeah, so it's basically just a suite of tools, and it helps with things like data management. It helps with, data integrity. It helps with syncing data. It helps with sort of improving integration. So it's all about like syncing, data management, connections.
Right. And it's an optional tool. It's one of the optional hubs in HubSpot. So as a customer, I always encourage clients to consider Operations Hub. And I wouldn't say that if I haven't seen the impact of it, because historically it's a relatively new hub. We have a lot of clients who don't have it. And it is solving for a lot of the challenges that they experience. They have people entering inaccurate information or incomplete records. It'll help you format and flag records that need additional data. They have lots of different connections with other systems going on, and it's getting lost. It will provide more advanced support for how to manage those. So in this example, typically where this next category comes in is where you're using custom fields and custom objects in HubSpot. Basically, if you're customizing your HubSpot system at all, you may need one of the more advanced sync connectors that is offered in the HubSpot ecosystem. And all these tools show up in the HubSpot directory, but not all are made alike. Sometimes one tool can support both use cases. As an example, Jackie, you mentioned earlier the QuickBooks Online integration. So there is a native /sync connector for QuickBooks Online. In the native or basic version, it synchronizes some core information between the two. In the more advanced version that requires Operations Hub in order to get all the functionality out of it, it allows you to not only move more advanced information, order data, for example, it also allows you to automate processes using the workflow engine in HubSpot. So you're getting more power, still, an off-the-shelf tool, okay? And then that brings us, so those first two are basically in the HubSpot directory. They may not be built or certified by HubSpot, but they're presented by HubSpot. And we know, that HubSpot customers use them, right? Now we move to a third category, the iPaaS products, right? Integration platform as a service. Say that 5 times fast. Typically, the one we see people talk about the most is Zapier. Jackie, what's your experience been with iPaaS tools and kind of pros and cons?
Yeah. I think where clients, what they don't understand is, for instance, like a Zapier, it can end up being more costly than just doing something custom, right? Custom, there's this upfront fee, right? However, with a Zapier, you are charged every time you do a zap, which is passing one piece of data from one system to the next. And what I
Right.
mean by that is it's not, first name, last name, email is one piece of data. You send first name, charge, last name, charge, email. So it's counting those zaps. So I find that
Mhm.
usually they're just a little bit more costly. It seems like a simple solution, but I sometimes it's not the best one or the right.
Mm-hmm. You bring up a really good point. I'm going to add two other thoughts to that. I'm going to do a little show and tell to give an example. And I'm actually going to look up the listing for HubSpot on the Zapier website. So another thing that's really important for people to understand is that these products and their advantage, by the way, let's talk about the advantage. One of the advantages, it doesn't require any coding skills, right? You can literally go online, drag and drop and set up a connection. One of the things people don't understand though is that HubSpot's, integration endpoint library, what we call the application programming interface or API library, has thousands of endpoints, right? You can move data in and out of HubSpot virtually from end to end. Okay. But products like Zapier will only select a handful that they will take the time to build into their no code platform. So just because HubSpot allows it doesn't mean Zapier supports it. So that's one big limitation is often the use cases that these products support are much simpler than people think and much more limited. The second thing that makes me nervous is when you set up, let's say, a bi-directional integration. I want to move companies to contacts and, companies to companies, contacts to contacts bi-directionally. When you do it through a Zap tool, any of these tools, which are trigger based. So in other words, I add or update a contact in A, it sends that information to B. But there's no relationship between what's going this way and what's going that. So for example, in the HubSpot native integration with salesforce.com that we've talked about a little bit, you can set very specific rules when to send this way, how it relates to what's going that way. So you don't have the systems just overriding each other and canceling each other out. When you do a Zap approach, there are a couple of configs that you can put in, but they're extraordinarily limited. And in my view, you're building a house of cards. The more Zaps you have, the more you have the risk that when one Zap fails, the whole thing fails. So we are not opposed to them. We are, a Zapier solution provider. We can set up Zaps and use the other tools as well, but this is by far the market leading product. But we encourage clients, simple use case, typically try to stick with unidirectional, or if you're going to be bidirectional, do it about different things. So they're not going to, conflict, and you have to be very thoughtful. But just remember, limited is limited for a reason. And to your point, Jacquie, the cost of those tools, people don't understand how much data they move. And, two companies, one could, maybe add 10 new customer records a day, and the other could add 1,000, and they think they're doing the exact same thing. So you're absolutely correct about that. So let's now move on to the next category, third-party toolkits. Now, these are products from non-HubSpot and they're not iPaaS companies like Zapier. They're not companies like HubSpot. They are third-party companies that have developed a toolkit that is pre-configured to connect HubSpot with other systems. We typically see this in HubSpot and ERP connections. Jacquie, what are your thoughts on these tools? And then I'll share some of my pluses and minuses.
I, you know, I guess I feel that they definitely can provide useful things within the system. I think it's one of those conversations around what am I looking to get out of the tool. The other place where I've seen a little bit of struggle from clients is that third party integrations, you need support from a partner like us or from the company that built the integration. HubSpot will not troubleshoot or help because they didn't actually configure the integration, right? The connector.
Yes,
So I think that's
absolutely.
something to, yeah, to call out and be aware of. But again, there's some great use cases for them, and there are some that maybe they don't provide what you're looking for, and you need to have further discussion around, your business needs.
And I'll give an example that could be, solved at any of these levels, and that's actually that Acumatica HubSpot connection. There is a native connector available in the HubSpot ecosystem directory between Acumatica and HubSpot. I wouldn't recommend anybody use it because it's way too dangerous and not very functional. Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing that's important to think about that actually I just wanted to mention, a lot of times connectors are built around marketing or sales or service and not the whole thing. We have a lot of companies who've developed, Acumatica being one, developed a native integration with HubSpot specifically around the marketing use case. Okay, but they did not envision HubSpot also as a CRM. So once you layer in CRM, you add additional complexity the connector was not designed to address. So that's one issue. But like in the case of Acumatica, we could use a sync connector or a native connector. You could use Zapier. Okay, never recommend that for an ERP connection, but you could. Commerciant and actually, I think all three of these companies, or at least two of them, offer options to connect Acumatica and HubSpot, as well as we've built Acumatica HubSpot custom integrations also. Um, and one of the challenges, let me talk pros before I talk cons, because these are great products and we often recommend them. Like right now, our sales department is speccing out either a Commerciant Sync Smart or ERP Bridge solution for I think 8 or 10 different companies as we speak. Okay. The advantage is that they are definitely more powerful than the stuff on the left, much more powerful. Okay. They're more powerful than the other tools we've talked about so far. However, it's really important again that you validate your use case. Let me give an example. We have a company that it wasn't Acumatica, it's a different ERP system. Didn't realize that how they code, how their ERP system codes their company records does not have an automatic dedupe. In other words, two company records could have the same master code in their other system. So then when they come to HubSpot, HubSpot doesn't know if those are one or two. You know, is that one company? Do I merge them or are they separate company records? These are the kinds of things that we need to think about carefully. All pieces of software are databases in the end, and every database is designed a slightly different way. There is no global database structure standard. You know, there are a lot of common practices, but there is no, you know, it's not like UL listed. There's no one you can go to say, did I set up my company records the right way? We like these tools because they are very flexible and very powerful. They're quick to implement. ERP Bridge in particular supports ODBC connections to in-house software. So if you have a client server database, yes, I know a lot of you do. Don't lie. It's okay. You can be, this is a safe space. You've got that 30-year-old client server running on Windows 95, sitting in a closet running your $500 million a year company. That is a very common scenario. We have a solution for that too. Okay. So they're powerful. They are pre-built. You can usually customize them or have us customize them. They also do get expensive pretty quickly. They get expensive very quickly. Typically, what they're looking for and how they're priced is based on the number of tables and fields being synced. There may also be limits to the volume of data moving between the systems. And you're paying a monthly fee ongoing. So it's a subscription. Not always, but most of these products are subscription based. You pay a setup fee and a subscription fee. We recommend them in probably 50 to 60% of the integration use cases where the other less expensive options aren't really a choice and where a customer isn't ready for a custom integration. Because let's talk about that next. What makes a custom integration work and what makes it not work? Like in your experience, Jacquie, what are critical keys to those projects being successful?
Yeah. I mean, we've touched on a few. So obviously having the right team, having all members involved. I think for custom integrations, one thing that I've run into is if you don't have someone that understands the tool you're connecting,
Mm-hmm.
um, you can run into issues. So I just worked with a client who we're doing a custom integration, and the woman I did the scoping with didn't have a really great understanding of like the technical back end side of their platform. It was their own platform. And so when we brought data over, it didn't look exactly how you expect it to look, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think those are important pieces, right? Like if we had involved the IT department and had all the right key players involved in the beginning, she wouldn't have been surprised with how the data looks. So I think
Mm.
that's the first part. Um, Again, we talked about having a clear understanding of goals and objectives and what we're trying to look at. So that's a big one. I think the other thing that I've run into a lot is like cleaning and prepping your data, right? So your data on one system could be messy, not validated, missing, the data integrity isn't there. And then you're bringing it over and connecting to another platform, and it's still not looking how you want it to look. And then all of a sudden clients go, well, what do I do with this data? It can't be used, right? So I
Right.
think it's really understanding the prep you need to do with your data, making sure it's going to come over how you want it to, that you're mapping things accordingly. Those are super important things. And then I think also the biggest thing is making sure you have a plan in place for like testing, making sure it's working how you want it to, the information's coming over as you were expecting. Um, all those kinds of things are super critical to having a successful custom integration.
You bring up a whole bunch of really good examples and thoughts on that. I'm going to throw another example on the table. That I want to talk a little bit about our process for scoping these, because that's something that's unique to Wendt Partners. So a couple of years ago, we were doing a project with a client in a retail facing industry, the self-storage industry, and they wanted to connect HubSpot to their front office software. The challenge, there were a number of them, but the big one that comes to mind is that when you're selling self-storage space, if Jacquie, you come, last year and you get a self-storage unit, you keep it for 6 months, and then you end that contract, you don't need the storage unit anymore. And then let's say 3 years later, you come back and you get a different self-storage unit at another location. Okay. Maybe, you're storing stuff because, I don't know, your kid went to college and now you want to put their stuff in a storage unit. You'd really like to throw most of it out, but you don't want your kid to disown you. So you put in a storage unit. As far as the company's billing, accounting, and sales departments are concerned, it doesn't matter whether that's treated as one customer or two. Okay. It doesn't matter that it's still Jacquie. All that matters is that a person came back or a person, has a new unit. Whereas to the marketing department and the customer success or customer service, it's critical. Like if the whole goal of the marketing function is to get repeat customer relationships and increase customer utilization of your products or services, you have to know that's one person. But literally the database running the entire front of their business not only had no way to clarify that, it had no function in the database or the software on top of the database to support it. So again, it's really these very simple seeming things that can just throw a wrench in the whole works. Okay. Because when you unify systems, you have to unify all the information about people and relationships. One contact, one company, one team, one distributor, one partner, whatever it is, it's got to be one. It can't be two. Two means duplicates. It's just that in a lot of business cases, the duplicates don't matter. And in other cases, they're absolutely mission critical and they have to be resolved. So tell us a little bit about one thing, Jacquie, that we do to avoid that kind of crisis. And that is our portal technology planning process, or HubSpot PTP. Tell us a little bit about what's involved and what that looks like.
So we do a scoping, right? So we have a conversation with all parties that should be involved, right? And we understand the business use case. So we're having those conversations up front, how it fits into their existing business, what the goals are, what they want to see from the integration. We ask a lot of technical questions to understand how the back end is configured, what systems they're using, all kinds of things. And the goal of it is so that when we do the custom integration, there are no surprises. It works
Mhm.
as expected, right? Those are the key things. So that's probably one of the most important things we do here is to make sure that we scope appropriately. So we're setting our clients up for success, and we're asking questions that you might not think about, right? Because you don't do custom integrations every day, understandably so, right? So
Right.
as subject matter experts, it's our job to help try to pull out those questions that gets the meat of what we're really trying to do here.
Absolutely. And I'm going to zero in on one thing that you emphasized there, which is that we're here to ask questions that might not occur to you. And the reason is because we're looking at it from two perspectives at the same time, business case and technology case. And our job is to unify those for you as your strategic customer, basically your CRM technology advisor. One thing I hope everyone's starting to sort of get a theme of is we recognize we are very much both technologists and business people. And you should feel comfortable that we're going to be able to advise you and direct you with both of those priorities in mind. So, and Jackie, you're, exemplifying that integrated view in everything you're sharing today. It's been incredible. So I know we're only got a few minutes left. I want to talk briefly about single pane integration, and then give everyone kind of a next step on where they can go from here. So single pane integration, the concept of single pane, it comes from single pane of glass. That term is used by a lot of IT strategists to talk about the ultimate objective for the user. And that is that they can stay on one screen, on one piece of software to run the business objectives they have for their day. Okay. And so some of our clients will take an added step where they will do a custom integration project, but they will also have us customize the actual underlying structure of HubSpot to support what they want to see. And for that, I'm just going to show a quick screen here, and that is our developer homepage. So HubSpot has a complete CRM development toolkit that allows us to create customizations of the user interface, of the actual how the software appears to the customer. Okay. I can create UI extensions. I can create them using a whole bunch of different pre-built components as well as custom components. And so now we're actually doing essentially software development to make HubSpot your spot, on top of bringing the right data into and out of HubSpot, between HubSpot and other systems. A good example is we had an oil company. So they deliver oil to residential and commercial properties. And in their world, an account is the relationship between a location and a customer. So Jackie moves from house A to house B. The customer is the same, but the account is different because the account only exists when Jackie's at 123 Oak Street instead of 456 Main Street. Okay. So we wanted to relate that information in HubSpot and then create screens that pull in data from their dispatching software and actually show it so that the customer success team or customer service team could interact with it. One of the reasons that was so important is because their customer service team is also a sales organization. They have dual responsibilities. So you can actually create essentially a custom application environment inside HubSpot with our help. And oftentimes that's done as part of an integration project. Whether it's phase one, it might be phase two. It might not be in phase one. So Jackie, I know we are down to the last few minutes. What are one or two things you would recommend that anyone attending walk away with as like their key thing to think about when they're thinking about how to apply today's discussion to their business?
I think the first thing is don't be afraid to ask questions. So if there's going to be things you don't know, you think you know, you've quite like you're not sure if you should ask, partnering with someone who is a subject matter expert is really going to make sure it goes off without a hitch, right? So I think being okay asking for help is critical when you're doing integrations and making sure you find the right partner, right? And then I think the second thing I would say is alignment amongst your organization is key to having a successful integration when you're building out sort of that process and what you want to do. And if that's not in place, what are you going to do to sort of improve? Would be my big takeaways.
Beautifully stated. Those were two extremely valuable takeaways. Jackie, thank you so much. And I want to thank everyone who joined us. I hope you felt that this hour was information packed and also maybe a little fun. We covered a lot of really important material in a very quick clip. The recording will be shared with you along with that one pager. And of course, we'll also be publishing this on YouTube. Keep an eye out for the invitation to our next web event. We do these every month. And thank you all for joining us for today's discussion about integrating your enterprise through HubSpot. Thanks again, Jackie. Everybody have a great day.